All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we are just on the precipice of the start of the 2022 NFL season. I'm ecstatic. I'm sure you NFL fans are ecstatic as well. This is a beautiful time of year. And even though the season officially starts on Thursday with a great matchup between the Rams and Bills, I always feel like the unofficial start of the season is the first Sunday of the year. I just love when all the games are at once. I feel like Sunday is truly the start of the NFL season, in my opinion. So because of that, we're going to be having some fun, and we're going to do this every week because it sounds like a fun idea to me. I don't know if I comment if you guys like this, but we're going to be setting a daily fantasy lineup, or basically a fantasy lineup for that upcoming Sunday for that week of the NFL season. So we will start with week one. Basically, for those of you who don't play daily fantasy, I'm on the FanDuel app, which is probably the most popular daily fantasy app. We have a certain budget to spend on every position, and then we have a fantasy lineup on the right side here. And we basically, usually the better the player, the more expensive they'll be. So we have to budget and kind of mix and match and find a good enough lineup for the amount of money we're allowed to spend, which is $60,000. A lot of people do this. I plan on doing it this weekend. It's free if you're of age, if you're in the right state. It's fun to do. I recommend doing it. Why not? And even if not, it's still fun to try to predict what players I think might go off this week. It's fun to make those kinds of individual predictions. So without further ado, we're going to do it, guys. We are going to try to set the best possible DFS lineup. Comment your opinions. Let me know who you think is a sneaky good play or who's going to go off this week in general. We're going to start with the quarterback position. So we only get one of these, obviously, with most fantasy lineups. So the people I like, okay, it's no surprise that Patrick Mahomes is the most expensive. I really like his matchup, though. The Cardinals, this game has shootout potential with two really good offenses. So I really like this. If you want to go the expensive route with a QB, it's all about how you budget your roster. You can afford a couple top-notch players at each position. So if you want to go the expensive route with QB, I do like the Patrick Mahomes matchup. And if I don't talk about a player, it doesn't mean that I don't like their matchup. It just means that we don't have time to go through really every player. So I have a few players that I have in mind that I particularly like, just in my opinion. So I really like, if we're going to go down this path, I really like, where is he? Jameis Winston. Okay, because I think Jameis Winston, fantasy-wise, is going to have a really nice year with the Saints offense. Hopefully Michael Thomas is healthy. He will be playing week one, I'm pretty sure. Chris Olave, the star rookie, I think he will be a star. Jarvis Landry, right? He's got weapons to work with. Alvin Kamara, of course. They open up in Atlanta against the Falcons, who still have a questionable defense. So if you want to go with a QB that could blow up this week to start the year, get off to a great start, he has doubters to prove wrong. I really like Jameis Winston in that spot against the Falcons. Then I really like Baker Mayfield at just $100 cheaper at $6,600. Hashtag revenge game against the Cleveland Browns, his former team. We all know the storylines. I think Baker Mayfield is poised to have a very nice year in Carolina, and especially this first game with DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, Terrace Marshall, Laviska Shenault, Christian McCaffrey, of course. He's got weapons. They're at home against a Cleveland team that their secondary is not as good as their front line, and I just think Baker Mayfield has all the reasons to get his career off to a good start. Then in the even cheaper route, Davis Mills. Okay, Davis Mills, I think he's better than people think. I'm not saying Davis Mills is a star or anything, but look, this game script against the Colts, the Texans are bad. Okay, let's be honest. The Texans are not a good team. They will not be a good team this year by any means. But it helps for fantasy because they should be down against the Colts and probably have to play catch up. And the game script favors the pass game, right, if you're behind. So I like Davis Mills in this spot if you want to go really cheap. And then guys that I don't necessarily like, I forgot to mention, I plan on bringing up at least a couple players at each position I'm not very fond of. Trey Lance. Okay, Trey Lance, we have no idea how Trey Lance is going to play this year, but 7,500 week one is a little bit steep considering that guys like Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins, who are pretty established, are cheaper than Trey Lance. I understand the boom or bust potential, and sometimes I think in DFS you should have, in fantasy in general, you should have some boom or bust type players, right? But Against the Bears, I think they're going to be ahead. I think the game flow, they'll go run heavy probably against the Bears here, and the game script for them favors more of the run game, and there's just so much uncertainty with Trey Lance. So I think if I were you, it would be a wait and see. I probably would not start Trey Lance this week. Then we move down to Daniel Jones, Danny Dimes, who for some reason is more expensive than guys like Ryan Tannehill, Trevor Lawrence, Matt Ryan. Like, I know Danny Dimes has the rushing potential, but against a really solid Titans defense on the road, I don't know. Daniel Jones has not had the most beautiful start to his career, so I think he's overpriced and I would not start him. And the same goes for Mac Jones, but I don't know why you would start Mac Jones, but on the road in Miami, this is not a great spot for him and his ceiling's not too high, so I would avoid him. So those are my QBs, who I like, who I don't like. Now, running backs this week. This might be a position, maybe the position you want to spend the most on, or you should be most likely to spend on a big-time player, because the matchups for the premier running backs in the league this week are salivating. They are juicy and delicious. Jonathan Taylor playing at Houston, love that. Derrick Henry at home against the Giants, very likely a positive game script, right? And these are two teams that they're playing that did not have good rush defenses last year. Christian McCaffrey against Cleveland is kind of middle of the pack, but because of his pass game upside, there really isn't a bad time to start Christian McCaffrey. And then Austin Eckler against the Raiders. I mean, this is going to be a high-scoring game, obviously, as it was to end the season last year when the Chargers and Raiders played each other. Alvin Kamara against the Falcons. We already talked about Jameis Winston against the Falcons. That's a good spot to start him. And then to move down, let's see, other guys I like. There's a lot of options here. I like Travis Etienne because I think 6,200 is pretty cheap for a guy who might be a workhorse week one, because his counterpart, James Robinson, will be active for week one against Washington, but he probably won't have a big workload. Travis Etienne with Trevor Lawrence, I think he's going to have a very good year, and I think he'll get it off to a good start, and the pass game upside is there. So for a guy who could be a workhorse, 6,200 is probably the cheapest for any running back that is the clear-cut number one, or it should have. He has the biggest usage of anyone who's 6,200 or cheaper. Who else I like? I believe he's here, or did I pass him? I really like Kareem Hunt. He's right around the same price as ETN. I think against the Panthers, I do think the Panthers will win this game, but I think there's the chance that Cleveland could be playing from behind, and I think with Jacoby Brissett, he could look to Kareem Hunt as kind of a safety blanket. So I like Kareem Hunt in week one. Do I have much more of a reason why? Not necessarily. I just think Kareem Hunt, I think Brissett's going to like passing to him, and I personally think they'll be playing from behind against Carolina, so I do like Kareem Hunt there. And then DFS is all about players who have the opportunity, whether it's temporary or not, and we're going to talk about a temporary fill-in, and that is Kenyon Drake for the Ravens, who recently signed him. In all likelihood, J.K. Dobbins isn't going to play, and Gus Edwards isn't going to play. They're still recovering from their injuries. So really, it's Kenyon Drake for Baltimore week one. And if you look at this report, it's really just him against really just Mike Davis, and Justice Hill. The backfield could be all his against the Jets. Very likely a favorable game script against a not great front line, not great rush defense. This is a blow-up spot for Kenyon Drake, who at 5,700 could have a huge workload week one. So for that reason, he is a prime DFS caliber starting running back. Guys that I don't like at the running back position, I do not love Dalvin Cook this week. Obviously, if you're playing season-long fantasy, you start Dalvin Cook every week if you have him. But for daily fantasy, against a phenomenal Packers defense, it should be a great Packers defense. And because the Packers, I personally think, will win this game, I think that it'll be a negative game script, and Dalvin Cook's not exactly a great pass-catching running back, so I don't love him in this week one matchup, especially for a guy that costs $8,400. There are better investments to make out there, especially this week. And then we move down to another guy who I just don't like his team that much in general. Should be a workhorse. I believe he is right here. David Montgomery. 6,600 is not too bad for a guy that is the clear-cut number one back in the backfield, but that offensive line is going to struggle this year. And against San Francisco, a good defensive line, good rush defense, and a team that a game in which the Bears will probably be playing from behind. I would fade David Montgomery. Not a big fan this week, as well as Cordarrelle Patterson. I frankly have, well, first of all, the Saints defense is just brutal, okay? That's the first reason. Second of all, I don't really know what kind of role Cordarrelle Patterson will have this year. I know he was a breakout player last year as a running back and as a receiver. He played a lot of running back towards the latter half of the year last year. So maybe they just straight up use him out of the backfield. And if that's the case, game flow tells you in this matchup against a brutal defense in a game that there's a good chance you'll be behind, I would not start Cordarrelle Patterson. So those are my running backs. Then we move on to the receivers. Receivers are different from running backs this week because I think the premier ones, a lot of them don't have the greatest matchups. So I think this is where maybe this is a position where you want to go maybe middle of the pack. So one guy, like for example, Davante Adams is always a safe start, right? So I wouldn't blame you for going with Davante Adams, right? He's the most popular or he's the most expensive. But some of these guys have tough matchups. Justin Jefferson against Green Bay, he's going to get shadowed by Jair Alexander. So I'm not a big fan of J-Jeff this week for DFS purposes. So guys that I do like, I love Keenan Allen against the Raiders secondary, which is not very proven. This game's going to be a shootout. So I love Keenan Allen in this spot, 7,400 for one of the safest receivers out there who is basically a lock to catch 100 passes every year. And it's not like he has boom or bust games. He just has such a solid floor. So very much worth that 7,400, I think, for a guy who's as close to guaranteed production as it comes. Davante Adams, again, he's a safe pick as well, so kind of like the Keenan Allen thing. I like him as well for the most part. I do like Terry McLaurin against the Jags. My Jags, I love the Jags, but Carson Wentz, he's the clear-cut number one guy for Carson Wentz to target, and it's not even close. The Jags secondary probably will be better this year, but it's not proven by any means. So if you want a really good, solid receiver who's probably a number one receiver or a wide receiver one for fantasy most weeks for someone who's only 7,000 compared to other wide receiver ones who are 8,000 and up, I like Terry McLaurin this week. I like Scary Terry. Brandon Cooks is another guy that I love this season in general. He's 6,600 right here. But especially this week against the Colts, because here's my logic with Brandon Cooks. Who else are the Texans going to throw to? That's all I'm going to say. Who else is Davis Mills going to throw to? Negative game scripts, week in and week out in all likelihood. He's the guy. Who else is there? Nico Collins. There's no one. Brandon Cooks had a really nice season last year on a bad team. Davis Mills is not a bad quarterback. So negative game script, it's all about volume, game script, opportunity. He's a good guy to start most weeks, but especially against the Colts when you're probably going to play from behind. 6,600, I will happily take that. We move down to cheaper options, okay? Let's go cheaper. I really like, actually, you know what? Before we move down to that, I'm going to move up really quick. I do like, if I can find him, Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, 6,900 for a guy who's the clear-cut wide receiver one on the Cardinals for the first 6 weeks of the season against the Chiefs. Like I mentioned, this will probably be a shootout. I like Hollywood Brown in this spot in a high-scoring game. I think he's going to get a lot of volume. He's got a high ceiling. I mean, why else is he nicknamed Hollywood? He makes big-time plays. I really like him, especially this week, but I really like him all season and the first 6 weeks specifically. Then we're going to go into the slightly cheaper options before we get to the much cheaper options. I do like Adam Thielen a lot at 6,100 because the Packers, I think, might play from ahead this game. They have a great front line that could neutralize Dalvin Cook. Jair Alexander is going to shadow Justin Jefferson. So that's where Adam Thielen comes in because the Vikings do have a good offense. I don't think they're going to get completely shut down by the Packers. Kirk Cousins, very solid QB. He's going to need someone to throw to. I think this is where Adam Thielen, in a tough matchup where the attention is towards Justin Jefferson, the obvious number one receiver on this team, and Dalvin Cook as well, this is where a second or second receiving option, third overall option on a team like Adam Thielen comes in. I really like him at 6,100. And then there's guys who are cheaper that, for example, Christian Kirk. with Laviska Shenault no longer being a Jag, I think Christian Kirk has a pretty good path to being the clear-cut number one receiver on a Jags team that could see a lot of improvements. I'm a Jags fan, call me biased, but you know what? They're kind of unpredictable. They're boom or bust. They could boom, who knows? But Trevor Lawrence, I think, will only get better, and I think he's going to establish Christian Kirk as his number one guy, especially with Laviska Shenault being gone, against Washington, who doesn't have a great secondary, so 5,800 for a number one receiver on a team, I'll take that most weeks. And then, speaking of number one receivers, I do not understand why Robert Woods is so cheap at 5,600. He's clearly the number one receiver on the Titans, and they're playing the Giants, who do have a decent secondary, but nothing to be frightened of. So I really like Robert Woods at 5,600. That is a great matchup right there. And then DFS, again, like I mentioned before, it's about boom or bust guys. Guys like, for example, we will get to him in a moment. Wait, did I already pass him? I think I already passed him. I think he's 5,400. Mecole Hardman, right? Guys like this who can give you monster weeks by having a couple big plays. These are the guys that can win you your weeks. Guys that could also lay eggs and have no points or almost no points, but guys who can just, for their value, they can also output a ridiculous number, an uneven number in a week. Just a lopsided, ridiculous number like Mecole Hardman can with a big play QB like Mahomes in a shootout potential game, like I've mentioned, Cardinals and Chiefs. This is the type of guy where 5,400, he can get you 200 yards on 3 plays. You know what I mean? So you got to start a couple of these cheaper guys that you can afford that can boom. Mecole Hardman is always a solid option because he can boom. Guys that I don't like, I don't love Tyreek Hill this week just because the Pats defense is brutal. I'm not one of the haters who doesn't think Tyreek Hill won't have a good year. I think he'll have a good year. I think Tua will have a better year than the last couple years. But Bill Belichick's lockdown defense for 7,700, I just think there's better options out there. I already mentioned that I don't love Justin Jefferson for DFS this week. And I also don't like, I was looking at him, and it was Allen Lazard, if I can find him. And I remember seeing him, and he was overpriced, I thought. Where is he? Let's see. Let's go up. Allen Lazard, where are you? Right here. 6,500 for Allen Lazard. Dude, how in the world is Allen Lazard more expensive than DJ Moore? I mean, that is just mind-blowing. Who says Allen Lazard will be Aaron Rodgers' number one weapon? I'm one of those people who doesn't believe that. When you have Sammy Watkins, you have Romeo Doubs, you have like other options, Christian Watson. Allen Lazard has had multiple years to prove that he's the number one guy or number two guy. He couldn't prove that. Who says he's going to be a number one guy? He has not lived up to his potential. Please, 6,500, you can get DJ Moore, you can get Juju Smith-Schuster, Amari Cooper, Darnell Mooney, like literally everyone. The next 10 guys are better options than Allen Lazard. Please avoid Allen Lazard week 1 against the Vikings. Could I be wrong? It's always possible, but seriously, I think he's way overpriced. We move on to the tight ends. This one's pretty simple. I think there's two guys that are almost a guarantee. Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, both have pretty yummy matchups, if I do say so myself. Travis Kelce, again, that shootout, Cardinals, Chiefs. I would get as many position players or skill position players as I could in this game because I really do think it'll be high scoring. Travis Kelce, no doubt the number one weapon for Mahomes. He does this every year. He's great every year. Always a safe start. Mark Andrews against the Jets, another delicious matchup, please. I mean, if you don't start Travis Kelce, I would start Mark Andrews. But if you don't want to go expensive on the tight ends, I like a guy like Zach Ertz, same game, Cardinals and Chiefs, high scoring, especially the first 6 weeks with him being probably the second weapon after Hollywood, with D-Hop being suspended, DeAndre Hopkins. I really like Zach Ertz in this spot. If you want to go even cheaper, get really budgety, Pat Freiermuth, who had a really solid year against the Bengals, who had the worst tight end defense last year for fantasy, and the Steelers might be playing from behind. And, Pat Freiermuth, 5,300, pretty solid option at tight end. And then we go down to even cheaper, just dirt cheap. You're just such a cheap person. Evan Ingram, look, again, Jags bias comes in, but the Washington doesn't have a great tight end defense. 4,900, I have no idea what we're going to see out of Evan Ingram or the entire Jags team, but they got Evan Ingram in free agency. They have some high expectations for him. He's clearly the number one tight end. Trevor Lawrence, Only going to get better, I think. I think he's going to have a very good year. Why not? Evan Ingram, kind of a boomer bust guy. We'll see how he does this year. And flex is obviously just running backs and receivers. We've already talked about him. So last but not least, the last position we'll talk about is defenses. The most obvious startable defense, and they're the most expensive for obvious purposes, is the 49ers at $5,000 because they're playing the Bears. This could get ugly, folks. If you want to go expensive, I would not blame you one bit for going with San Francisco's defense. The same goes with Baltimore against the Jets. We don't know if Zach Wilson's going to start. Could be Joe Flacco, which is even better. Even if Zach Wilson does start, you know, he hasn't proven that much. He turns the ball over a lot from what we've seen so far. This could be a good spot for the Ravens. I also like the Titans against the Giants, 4,600. You know, I think they should be ranked kind of as the third or top three defense. I don't love the Saints defense this week against the Falcons because even though I think the Saints will win, I don't think the Falcons offense is that bad. I actually think it has some potential, but it's not a bad spot. But I would personally rank the Titans defense over the Falcons. I think they have more turnover potential against Danny Dimes than maybe Marcus Mariota, because Mariota doesn't turn the ball over a ton. He just isn't exactly a great thrower of the football, but he doesn't cause that many turnovers and won't get sacked that much. So who else? Okay, budget defenses. Actually, we're going to throw in one more. Colts against the Texans. That's a very good one at 4,500. I know you could say Davis Mills. Again, I said he's not that bad, but still, Colts, they get a lot of turnovers, a lot of sacks. Texans aren't that good. So that's a pretty good defense to stream. But if you want to go cheaper, Dolphins against the Pats. Mac Jones on the road isn't as good as at home, and he's not hard to sack. The Dolphins have a pretty good edge rush now. Mac Jones, he gets sacked a lot because he's very immobile. Let's be honest. Let's call it what it is. So if you want a cheaper defense, Miami at home, high expectations this year. They could get their season started off well, and they can get to Mac Jones many times, potentially. Who knows? And once again, guys, listen. Hear me out. The Jags against the Commanders. 3,600 for the Jags, one of the cheaper defenses. Have the Jags proven anything that's even close to a semblance of the defense they had a few years back with Saxonville? No. But hear me out. Just this week, the only week I might be able to justify starting the Jags defense. Do you guys recall what Carson Wentz did against the Jags? The last NFL game he played, he choked, he winced, he doesn't rise to the occasion. He has PTSD. I think this is the same Jags team. This is Carson Wentz's last chance to prove himself as a QB, his third team. Starting the season at home, there's some pressure there. Then you have to remember, he's playing his former coach in his first game in Washington. Doug Peterson, the Jags coach now. Doug Peterson knows Carson Wentz inside and out. Pause. But you know what I'm saying. This is a good spot. The Jags play Carson Wentz well. You have to remember that. Things carry over sometimes. Cheap defense, I would start them. So ultimately, guys, those are the best recommendations I can give you. So ultimately, what is my personal team for this week? Well, I will show you in a second. All right, guys, so here's my lineup off to the right here. With the money that I had available, I do have 200 left to spend, but I looked at every position and I don't think there's somewhere where I can kind of clearly upgrade. I just really like this combination of players with the budget that I had. So we're going to leave $200 on the table. I'll do one more check to see if there's maybe a flex that I can get for 200 more, but I really couldn't find one that I thought was worth getting. Yeah, I really like the team that I have here. I think this is a good team, but that's just my opinion. I definitely want to hear your guys' opinions. Who do you like for this week? Who do you not like for this week? Where do you agree with me? Where do you disagree with me? Like if you enjoyed the video, guys. Subscribe if you're an NFL fan. You haven't done so already. Consider it. Why not? And guys, I'm ecstatic. Super excited, super pumped for this NFL season to start. Just a couple days away. Hope you guys are excited as well. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.